Hi again. Today I'd like to talk about noise removal. In the old days, back in the days of standard definition television, I was working on a program and we would need to add a little bit of animation on top of a still background. And the show was being shot on 16 millimeter film, and that was something that was just barely acceptable for broadcast in standard definition of the time. And the plates were usually pretty noisy. And you can think of something like this. I've simulated this noise, but you get the idea. Um, and I'm just going to show what we did at the time. We would load in about 10 frames or maybe 6 or 7 and average them. And in fact, Howler has a feature that does exactly that. In fact, I used to use Howler for that purpose on that show. But let's see if I go to the right click on the film strip, there should be a thing called if I can remember where it's gone to. It's been so long. Called average frames, right there, and just average the frames that I have selected, or the frames, all the frames that I have. And you can see just averaging those frames removes a lot of that noise because, well, the original image is there, and the noise is sort of a deviation from that. And when you average them, you're averaging back to that original image. Pretty neat how that works. So as you can see, we still have the noisy frames, but we just averaged them together, and we got this much cleaner looking um, plate. And that's what we would do at the time. But what do you do if you have something, if you have only one frame? Let's see. Let's just load something up. Like, well, let's use one of these. All right. So I'll clear this. I'll free this animation. And well, how do you denoise this? Well, one way would be to do a mean filter, or in other words, you're averaging everything within a local neighborhood. And you do that enough, you do eventually remove the noise. But why is that bad? Well, it blurs everything else too. It removes also all the high frequency detail across the entire image. Well, why does that work? Well, when you do a blur filter, you say you take this pixel right here where the pointer is, and you average it together with all of its neighbors, say within a small radius, and that becomes a new color for that pixel. Well, that's fine for this blue sky over here, but what if you do it right next to an area where there's a sharp feature? Well, you're now averaging in all those the colors, the greens over there, and you're averaging the blues, and you just get this blurry mess. So yes, it removes noise, but it also destroys your image. So that's a problem. But what if you could do a blur uh, that takes advantage of the properties of what we did before, where we had those all the same frames, but we averaged out the noise by by averaging, but the details more or less stayed the same. Well, how can we do that on a still image? Well, if you look at this image, there's a lot of self similarity. Let's say this spot right here looks a lot like this spot right here, and maybe this spot right here, and maybe even a spot over here and a spot here. Well, there's lots of things that look very similar. So what if we could average this spot with this spot and this spot, and then you'd end up getting something that looks a lot like the original uh, detail, but with that noise around it averaged out. That would be really cool. And we can actually do that. It's very computationally expensive because you have to search way all over the place to find it, but it's actually possible. So, what we have is what's called under the noise filter, it's called non-local noise removal. It's called a non-local means noise removal filter. So it's doing that same thing we did before, is doing the mean or the average of a neighborhood, but instead of using a local neighborhood, the neighborhood can be, anywhere in this image as long as the features are similar. I'm going to go to that, and what we do is block matching, and there's a search distance, and that's in pixels how far it will search in any direction. And you can set this way up. The only problem with that is it'll take a lot longer. So we usually use a small distance, and it still gives pretty good results because you can see like this detail here is very similar to this detail here and this detail here. It can find things usually within that distance. We have a few other parameters like the block size. Usually the default's fine. And then there's also a level, how much noise we want to remove. So it's really just a matter of setting up that default thing, hitting calculate, and waiting for it to go. So I'm going to cancel this because that wasn't enough noise removal. We got a lot of noise in this. Hit calculate again, and you'll start to see it removing noise. And there you go. So I might bump that up a little bit more because this is a very noisy image. Normally you wouldn't see a image this noisy and try to salvage it, but it's going to give it its best shot. And as you can see now, it is going through, it is removing a lot of that noise and maintaining sharp details. And it does take quite a long time, but that is, the state of things. So that is, in a nutshell, non-local noise removal. It's a fairly new idea. Has been having a lot of success. There's a lot of offshoots from this in a lot of different things, image resizing and that sort of using the same sort of ideas as this. But that's a feature in Howler 2022. And that's about all I had to say for now. Thanks for watching, and talk to you later.